Before we go live over here, hi to Instagram Live. We are just taking a new approach to lifestyle business. So we're going live on our Zoom webinar, but we wanted to open it up for our Instagram audience to see if you'd be interested in joining us on a future episode of Lifestyle Business.
All right.
Hey.
And here we are. We're live. I'm Chris.
And I'm Ann, and this is Lifestyle Business on Launchpad TV. So we are back today with another episode of Lifestyle Business. Today, we are going to have an amazing show. 3 guests. That's right, 3 guests today. We've got Jimmy Flores bringing a new platform for PPP, Amith Nagarajan talking virtual engagement for brands, and Dr. Alison Macintyre sharing some tips and tricks for working remotely.
Indeed.
A timely topic for sure.
Indeed.
So before we get started, as our audience is joining us, I have been craving the beach this week. So that's the thing that I'm missing, and looks like our summer plans for going to the beach probably off the table. But nonetheless, we often go. Your family.
Wait a second. I got us to the beach.
Look at here. So I'll go away. There is a favorite view of ours. It's called Wrightsville Beach in North Carolina. And we just found out that they opened up. And so we sort of went, uh-oh, come on, North Carolina.
I don't know what everybody thinks. Maybe you can, put in the chat room what everybody thinks about beaches opening up.
Beaches opening up.
Ready or not. But,
are you ready for the beach? Florida says yes. Wrightsville says yes, as long as you're not there, Ann. And we've been talking about that. But actually, it was kind of interesting when we think about how we're going to return to the new normal. It is actually going to be a new normal. And what Wrightsville is doing is actually really smart. Not everybody still likes it because, the whole fact that COVID is a hoax. But for the most part, I think people are taking a very reasonable approach. They have opened it for exercise.
Oh, okay.
So what do you miss most about the beach? I miss seeing the water. I miss the sand in my toes. I miss getting out there, doing some swimming in the waves. And you can do all of that in Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina. So,
but it's not like a spring break. It's not.
No dogs, which is always the case. No chairs, and no sunbathing. Which realistically these days, with the sun so hot, climate change, you shouldn't be sunbathing anyway. So it's kind of
I wouldn't mind
brilliant
on the beach right now.
I'd love to go to the beach right now. Anyway, I bet you would, because last night you were up in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Anyone else waking up at 3 a.m. for reasonably no reason?
Having the coffee.
And not even. We've been in a good mood. We took the weekend, and we're still waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning. What were you doing at 3 a.m.?
Well, I don't know. My mind is just, running a mile a minute.
Look at the book.
Yeah.
Look at the book.
I tweeted out the other day, I've got like 3 notebooks that I've got with me at all times. I've got so many thoughts running through my head. We mentioned this on a previous show. It's sort of a little bit therapeutic, trying to kind of journal a little bit right now and take notes about this time, because I think in retrospect, eventually this is going to be a very, very strange time. But anyway, I was up for an hour jotting notes at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Well, and you do like to jot notes. Like we'll be at dinner and all of a sudden the red book comes out. This will be like, mostly I think it's because I've said something brilliant and let's just go through here.
Always. That's always what it is.
Holy shit. There is a lot of me, a lot of my ideas in here that he's writing down. So more on the notebook later. All right. So you were up. We were talking about PPP. Obviously, was that what was keeping you up?
Well,
hold the phone. Did you hear about Shake Shack and Ruth's Chris?
Has anybody gotten theirs yet? Because Shake Shack did, and Ruth's Chris, and there was a whole list of companies.
Technically, Shake Shack gave it back.
I know, and can you believe Steve Mnuchin actually tweeted, like, thank you for giving it back? Like, you were the one who allowed that to happen. But it's clearly, like, the, most connected people are getting it, which, seems, I guess the way it goes, we can't complain too much about it. I mean, we had talked about the fact that our banker up until this point was kind of a teller or an ATM machine. I think it really pays to have a banking relationship, a solid banking relationship, and clearly these guys did, right?
Yeah, yeah, for good reasons. I mean, talk about squad goals. I'd like to run a business where I have a good banking relationship.
Yeah.
So I think those are some goals and objectives for us. That said, you sort of, I think you mentioned it kind of felt a little like watching TV after Katrina.
Well, it's sort of like this whole process. I mean, even on this show, we've been talking about PPP and CARES Act, and you kind of get excited. It has reminded me, and that was one of the things I was jotting down. I don't know if everybody remembers Katrina or not. Those of us who went through it definitely do. But there was a week where we were watching CNN. Most of us, if you were fortunate to be, were evacuated, but you're watching CNN and you're like, when is the cavalry going to show up? Or actually, more specifically, when is FEMA going to show up, right? How long is it going to take to get there? Tanker trucks were being sent by Walmart. There were all kinds of actions before the federal government even kicked into gear. And then, that's when George Bush showed up and said, heck of a job, attaboy, Brownie. Anyway, this reminds me of that in that you can't count on the federal government as much as we all need these PPP loans and the EIDL. They were passed. Marco Rubio's doing his best. These bankers and there's various channels. Maybe we'll eventually get them, but you can't count on them. And so I was sort of reflecting over the weekend that you and I had a conversation about we were talking about resiliency, and this is a time where everybody has to create a personal plan, right? What is our family PPP here?
What's our version of recovery? It's kind of like when you're like, all right, if there is an earthquake, meet me on top of the hill in Dolores Park.
Right. I mean,
at Richard's house.
We're not normally, great at budgeting and thinking about things and credit cards and what we're spending, but this is the time to do it, right? This is the time, I've got our mortgage company. I don't know if you know this, you have to go and write a letter to them. There's obviously no website link, or they don't make it easy for you.
Should write that letter.
But we have to write a letter to them to request relief. We're getting relief letters for Launchpad and working to honor those because we understand, the pain that people are feeling. But you really have to take responsibility for yourself. That was the lesson from Katrina, and that's the lesson for now. Is the cavalry is not coming, or at least the cavalry won't be there instantly. So to keep your head above water and keep afloat, those folks that are most resilient and able to handle this are kind of pulling those plans together and getting ready to execute on them. At least that's what we're doing.
Personal, I'm excited to find out what our personal recovery plan is. Mine's just like, hold on. All right, well, I bet we're not the only ones up at 3 a.m. So do you have any tips for folks who are up at 3 a.m.? I mean, I have one, but.
Well, you have yours. Mine is, I've got a book that you can't look at your phone, Twitter, it just keeps you up longer. It's just a disaster if you start going down those rabbit holes, especially because at 3 a.m. my Twitter is all Nigerian Twitter. But I've got a nostalgia book that's sort of my candy right now about growing up in the 70s. I'm enjoying it. It takes me back to
that's good. A simpler time.
Simpler time. Yeah.
Fair enough. I do a sleep meditation. So if anyone wants to check it out on YouTube, it's from this nice British gentleman called The Honest Guys. I'm not sure why, and they have like hundreds and hundreds of videos. I'm not sure why they have to call themselves The Honest Guys. Like, is there a dishonest guy in the world of meditation and sleep meditation. It kind of freaks me out that maybe like someone is putting you under a spell and they may not be working for good. But anyway, the honest guys are honest, and I highly suggest checking them out. They have these fall asleep fast or get back to sleep, or now they've got some interesting ones around sort of like managing pain, managing anxiety. Last night I was imagining, I was like, I wonder if I'm not going to go there. So anyway, check out the honest guys. I think you would appreciate it. So why don't you pull up our next guest?
All right, let's try and
Jimmy Flores is the co-founder and CEO of Qualytics, an advanced acquisitions platform and private marketplace for OZ communities. That's opportunity zone communities for those of us and stakeholders. He's dedicated to supporting the promotion, development, and uplifting of underserved communities. And we met Jimmy through our partnership with EIG, and he shares our view about having an impact across the country, and he's been another opportunity zone pioneer alongside us. And through that, generating social impact investment. Today, though, he's here to talk to us. Of course, we had to have a PPP segment about his newest venture, Blue Acorn, and how he is working to actively help small businesses navigate PPP loan and grant processes.
So just as we
Welcome,
said,
Jimmy.
Cavalry's not coming. Here it is.
Here we go.
Jimmy, you're here to tell us all how we're going to get those loans, right?
Right. And I don't know if you know the news today, but the White House and Congress came up with the with an agreement to pass another $450 billion, and
That's
$125 billion will be set aside for what they call the unbanked, which is essentially rural communities, minority owned, the protected class. So this is absolutely huge news. We just got this a few hours ago, and our platform, Blue Acorn, focuses primarily on the unbanked or underserved. And from our background in opportunity zones, it was an easy pivot because we're very familiar with this with this community or these type of people.
I know, Jimmy, the reality is that for the last 2 years since the Opportunity Zone bill came out, I think you've been also on the forefront of the same mantra that I've been banging tables across the country on, which is
you and I have been going in circles between each other. This is the first time we've connected in 2 years.
I know, right? When we're like super fans from the side, but
right?
I have been pounding tables saying, guys, like one less statue and one more small business. If you want to build a sustainable goal around real estate and all of these tax incentives, you've got to invest in the businesses that activate those developments. And these markets and these segments and opportunity zones across the country are the ones that are going to get the hardest hit. And we're going to see continued expansion of wealth happening on the coasts. And if we don't help them now, and we don't have a great plan for building back these communities and these entrepreneurs,
absolutely,
we're kind of fucked. So how are you guys helping out?
Yeah, so in the opportunity zone space, we are helping underserved communities get investments, and rightfully so. A lot of these communities in rural areas, or we would call them, let's say, like tertiary markets, they couldn't compete with New York or LA. So we were trying to create a platform, an investment platform to streamline investments, mitigate risk, and drive dollars to give these investors confidence to go into these communities, right? However, that world turned upside down, and we realized during the middle of March that our country was in serious, dire help. They needed help with all these businesses being shut down, and they were now talking about this bailout program, whatever. So I was invigorated to do something about it after seeing all of my friends and family members start, considering bankruptcy for their businesses. And I'm like, this is unacceptable. We can't let this happen. And so I pulled the strings and started working on a plan to work with various local leaders, community leaders, people in Congress on how can we help these, how can we help these businesses? And I banded together with other high-powered entrepreneurs. And, this wasn't a Jimmy Flores show, or this wasn't a Nate Reese show, any of these individuals that I'm working with. This is truly helping the businesses that are struggling right now. And we made this platform to essentially streamline the loan applications for these businesses so they can get the money that the government essentially promised them that they would get as fast as possible. Now, when you're building a platform like this, it takes a little bit of time. And we were very blessed to have very talented engineers on our team to make this happen within a short amount of time. But the first round, the money only lasted 13 days, which is absolutely insane. 351 billion or something like that, 49 billion was completely gone in 13 days.
Yeah.
And on this second round, we expect that money to be gone even faster. So
because all of us have at least applications in.
Absolutely. And the thing is that, instead of trying to do these protests or petitions and advocate, as an individual getting the money, why not get complete applications stacked up, ready to go to bring to banks? And those are essentially your petitions that if you need to go to Congress and go, hey, these are applications that are from the underserved communities. These are bundled up, they're ready to go. They need to be funded. And if a bank is not going to accept them, why didn't the bank accept them? If a lender is not going to accept it, why didn't they accept them? That will be unacceptable. It needs to be funded because they need to compete. And by working with thousands of businesses, we did a soft launch. I think I did like a Facebook post of just, hey, this is our platform. We're doing this because of whatever that may be. I wrote a long thing. We got 1,000 applications within 48 hours.
That's amazing.
That's insane.
That's amazing.
That's insane.
Yeah.
And so you could just see the demand and these are business owners. Mind you, a lot of them are independent contractors, 1099ers, or small businesses with under 5 employees. But those are the people that really need the help.
Yeah, the smaller you are, the more you need it. You heard us talking about Shake Shack and Ruth's Chris a little bit at the beginning.
Yeah, they gave it back. How can they give it back? That's a whole nother thing. That's ridiculous.
So it's awesome what you're doing, and I think it's amazing how a lot of the folks who have been in the opportunity zone space for a while are quickly pivoting, because this is the need right now, and doesn't mean we're not going to go back to OZs, but this is sort of the critical need. So for anybody who's watching right now, can you just kind of walk them through the process with Blue Acorn? And I'm particularly interested. I'm not sure I have a full understanding, but different banks and CDFIs are getting sort of an allocation of funds that they're going to be able to lend. Is that what you have, or how are you sort of getting the applicants into the pipeline?
Sure, and I like how you bring up the community development financial institutions, the CDFIs, because they play a critical role in this whole process, right? Those are the ones that truly care about servicing these small businesses. However, I'll tell you, before I go into the process of Blue Acorn, I'd like to discuss some of the bottleneck issues that a lot of these lenders are having.
Yeah.
For one thing, the SBA only approved 66,000 applications in 2018. 66,000. And that was for 365 days. So within the past 13 days, they approved 1.4 million. So there's a huge bottleneck on the federal side, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of these banks, think about Wells Fargo, Bank of America, they have an almost impossible task of handling all of these inbounds, because for one, we're all practicing social distancing, so that you can't just walk into your branch and go, hey, I need a loan. Secondly, they don't have the technology capabilities, more so on the community bank side, but they don't have the technology capabilities to actually process the underwriting and the customer service.
Right.
These are loan officers that are trained to do one thing, and their customer service lines, they have to rely on call centers. It is a huge issue. And third, the lending capacity for some of these banks is minimal. You think that banks have all this money just sitting around, or they can get this money within the time period that they were asked to go ahead and service these loans. We have CDFIs that maybe are sitting on $5 million just to give them right now. And because of the systems in the back end with SBA, they're not getting the go-to to go, you know what, we're going to fund these and they're guaranteed by the government. So they're kind of like, well, what if we fund it and it's not guaranteed? And on top of that, we want to service our own clients because they've been clients with us for years. How can we service new clients that are just begging on our doors and going, hey, my bank will give me a loan. They're not an SBA approved lender. I need to speak with someone that is. They don't have the money for that or the resources. So
yeah, go ahead. I was just going to ask you, and getting into Chris's questions, but who's your ideal customer for this? Who do you think you want to help the most, or is the right person to be a Blue Acorn?
Sure. And talking about all these problems, it just leads to why we created this whole thing, right? The ideal customer is the underserved, the individual, the independent contractor or the small business that doesn't have a banking relationship. They don't have a CPA or accountant to help them with their paperwork, that maybe relied on a TurboTax sort of thing to process their taxes, right?
Right.
Yeah.
We essentially created the TurboTax for the loan process. So an individual can simply, through a Fisher Price model, go through our platform, get the application in with all the right documents. We provide the customer service, and then we will make sure that the lender, whoever that may be, is funding your loan. And it might not be your own bank, but at least you get the funding you need under the terms that are given by the statute and in the legislation. All
right, cool. And do you want to walk us through kind of what to expect from the process?
Yeah, a lot of the steps are very simple. You go to the site, you click Get Started. It's a very simple question and a Q&A format to really funnel you down on we're trying to identify who you are, right? If you're a gig worker, you have employees, what does your payroll look like? Are you a protected class, right? Because we want to make sure that we're fighting for you first and foremost. And then once you get into the back end through your profile and dashboard, that's where you can go ahead and submit documents. You can go in and answer more questions to really get your application complete. And also, yes, we're focused on the PPP program right now, but we're getting hit up from a lot of different banks and foundational grants to go, hey, we have grants. We want to have a process to push, this grant out there. Can you essentially build your platform around getting, recipients for our grants? We're like, for sure, of course we can. And I know that Launchpad has a foundation too. And that would be a great service for you guys as well, I'm sure.
We need grants. We don't have grants.
Right? No, for sure. But and yes, I see EIDL. So EIDL, they are going to get an extension on according to our sources in DC. They are going to get an expansion of their lending capacity. However, the biggest demand right now is the Paycheck Protection Program. And then the second biggest one that not many people talk about is the Main Street Fund, which is $600 billion for businesses under 10,000 employees. So that's going to be another phase in this, which we are going to handle too. But we got to focus on the small businesses that are underserved, because that money, if let's say, for instance, let's break down the timeline. They get it passed through Congress tomorrow. It goes on President Trump's desk. It gets signed, let's say by Friday. Then it gets enacted in law next Wednesday. By next Friday, we believe it's going to run out.
Yep.
And that's just the realistic thing.
Yeah.
However, that's on the main fund outside of the funds reserved for the underserved. So if you don't have your application in, or if you're not working with your bank, or if you want to work with us, we recommend to go to the platform or go to your bank and go, listen, I just want you to hold my app and be ready to pull the trigger, because that money is going to be on. That's just how it is.
Right. And people should be getting their application in with you or with your banker now, because people are waiting in line. There were already people in line with the last allocation that haven't gotten it but are still sort of in line. So you want to move on this.
So we've got a couple questions from the audience here. Dorian's asking, there's a bunch of good questions here. I'm going to throw them at you. I have read that OZ is dying in this COVID and market crash environment. So what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely not. Opportunity zones are actually going to be reinforced, we believe, because the reason why opportunity zones existed, because these communities couldn't recover from the last Great Recession.
Yeah.
So with this program now in its early stages, you're going to see a lot of movement within the program. For one thing, President Trump supports Tim Scott like no other, for many reasons, right? And we are collaborating with Senator Tim Scott's office on this. You're going to see it expand. You're most likely going to see it expanded not only on the investor side but also on the area side. And there are projects right now that are still getting funded. I mean, think about it. People are calling for manufacturing to come back home or localize around our country, and new land right now is, it's still relatively cheap in these opportunity zones. So you're not seeing more so of a slowdown of the projects. It's just investors are kind of like, shy to pull the trigger because, rightfully so, what is going to go on in the next 30 days? But that doesn't mean that they don't have the capital gains to fund. I mean, if you look at the stock market, the people that sold off, most likely those people made gains still, because 10 years ago, the stock market was at what, 12, 11,000? So there were gains made still. It's just people are still waiting around, figuring out what's going to happen in the next 30 to 45 days, and then they'll make better decisions. And opportunity zones, I believe, will be reinforced even more.
And there's sort of a crisis
cannot die
component right now, which the PPP and the grants are going to happen. The opportunity zone legislation will be more of a longer term support for these communities in the same way it always has been, but it's not the, kind of acute tool right now. The tool right now is the PPP and whatnot.
I think we've all agreed that the opportunity zone legislation has not done enough to actually get to the realization of what the potential was with business investment, right? So it's very much been a real estate tool. This now new environment is actually an environment that's shining a light on these communities where we need to focus. And what we're seeing is other leaders in the opportunity zone space who care about businesses like ourselves are, leading the charge in terms of what are the small business resources that we're going to be putting together? What are the programs that we need to do to help these communities? And it's sort of like a new approach to opportunity zones with those folks who have been sort of trying to lead the charge there. And I think the fair question is that, we'll see where the investors land. It's not like we had thousands of investors who were jumping in an opportunity zone operating business investments to begin with. But I think that this is another opportunity for us to shine a light there and to have a comprehensive top to bottom strategy around how we infuse and support small businesses, whether that's through OZs or through other programs out there. The site for Jimmy, thanks, Jimmy.
And I want to add in one more thing. They are mentioning various phases in the COVID-19 legislation response, right?
Yeah.
You're going to start hearing more about investment in infrastructure or manufacturing and whatever that may be. You're going to start seeing more of the government putting more monies into various programs. But this isn't going to be a direct government investment, in my opinion. It'll most likely be a public-private partnership, and the private side will be more geared towards opportunity zones. Because that's the law that's already been enacted. So why create something new?
Right.
That's great. All right, Jimmy, we got to wrap up here. One last question, just any geographic issues for being able to access Blue Acorn, or is this something that's nationwide?
Nationwide, we are currently rolling out in every single different state of various banks that only lend to those specific states. However, you can apply now, and the faster you put your application in, the bigger the case that we make for going into leveraging banks and lenders to give us the resources that we need.
All right, that's great, Jimmy. Thank you so much. We're going to be sharing a link that all folks and attendees and future watchers can be able to access. Get your docs ready, get yourself prepared. The cavalry is here for PPP.
That was great news, and we engage with Jimmy on Twitter, and you should totally follow him. Ariel, maybe you can put his Twitter handle in the chat. Really appreciate
Twitter
his
friendships are real.
energy around this. So thank you, Jimmy. Before we bring on our next guest, let's talk a little bit more about the recovery process. What's the magical date as you look in your crystal ball when we all go back towards normal?
Well, what's normal going to be?
Well, that's what I mean. We're going back towards normal. We're not going back to normal.
What would be, well, let me think about it. So, well, one of the biggest things that we don't do right now is eat out at restaurants.
All right. So when can we go to a restaurant?
Apparently, relatively, when shelter in place is lifted. We used to eat out a lot.
Did you hear what Gavin Newsom yesterday was sort of describing, at least for California? And
No, tell me.
Well,
wait, don't tell me. Yeah, tell me.
We're going to be going to restaurants. Table capacity will be 30% of normal. So we're sitting across not sitting right next to.
Old people will be able to hear, so that's positive.
Your server comes out with rubber gloves on, maybe a face mask.
Maybe black ones, because that'll be sort of more stylish.
Yeah. I guess, mask? Well, your server would. You obviously can't wear it if you're eating, but sounds pretty inviting, right?
That doesn't sound that good, actually.
Well, some people really want to get out of their house, but it doesn't sound as good as, it's not normal.
I mean, it is a fun thing, right? To go out on a Friday night, maybe with another couple, maybe with a couple other couples, have a nice cocktail, enjoy that, have somebody else cook, make sure we don't have, I mean, it's a disaster at our house after cooking. So I don't know who to blame for that. But it is nice, but it's true. It's going to be the rise of the dinner party.
Yeah, there may be some long lasting. I mean, we're eating most of our meals, all of our meals at home, and except unless they're here at the desk.
But you know what? Not all of the dinner party. That's an interesting point. What if I were a chef, which I'm not, or a private chef, I would create It's Not Takeout. The idea that we should just do this business, right? No. But it's called It's Not Takeout. And basically, you could sign up for a private chef at an accessible price, and maybe it would come with all the plates and the serveware and like the rentals, right? Because chefs know how to organize rentals if they're catering. It wouldn't be catered. It'd just be like when we go to Campofina or whatever, it's like $100 for 4 people to eat whatever it is. And they would have like a 3-course meal. And then you would put all the stuff outside your door, and then someone would pick it up, and you'd be able to have a dinner party in a box.
Sounds pretty nice.
I think it's great. I think that for those aspiring chefs out there, make that your business idea on recovery.
I mean, I think that it's an interesting idea, and I'll bring in the next guest as you start
Amith,
to introduce him.
Have you join us.
Thinking about what life is going to be like after this, as we go, like we said, towards normal, not back to normal. And if you're looking for business opportunities, we are looking to save our business, keep our business going. And many people are doing that. But if you're looking for new business opportunities.
I don't think investing in new business opportunities is part of the personal recovery plan.
No, that's cut. All right, Amith, we're gonna bring you in here.
All right, Amith is the founder of Rasa.io, a platform that allows brands to deliver personalized and meaningful content to their audience via smart newsletters powered by AI. I love the fact that Amith is rethinking the newsletter. Outside of Rasa.io, Amith is an active early stage investor. He's a big first believer in B2B SaaS companies. And has a good fortune of 2 decades of success as an entrepreneur. This guy is our serial entrepreneur, I can tell you that. He finds meaning and joy in helping others in their entrepreneurial journey, and he's been a huge help in our entrepreneurial journey, so we are delighted to have you on board. Hey, Amith.
Hi, great to be here.
Where are you right now? Where are you sheltering in place?
I am in New Orleans. Threw up a virtual background because I've got a big mess, but I'm in New Orleans.
All right.
Well, I love the background. It's very professional looking. It's a smart thing. We should have
Alec and Jonah. Have you noticed how he's positioned immediately in front of the screen beside? You can see the copy. Some tips. You guys can work on that this afternoon.
Well, so let's jump in and talk about Rasa.io. We've been using it. Some people in our audience probably have started to get newsletters over the last few weeks. powered by Rasa. One went out this morning. But why don't I let you sort of introduce what you're building here? It's a very interesting product.
Sure, thanks. So Rasa.io, in its simplest explanation, essentially is a software tool that makes it extremely easy to send a great newsletter out. So I'll drill into two key terms. First of all, newsletters have been around forever in printed form, and email newsletters have been around since email pretty much, but they've always been a lot of work. People have had to put a lot of effort into creating a newsletter, and so generally speaking, the frequency of newsletters has not been very high. Brands that had newsletters might do them monthly or quarterly. It's just not all that frequent. The other thing is that the greatness of the newsletter is subjective, but how do you do a great newsletter? And really it's such a simple answer. It's have great content, right? So of course that takes you back to how do you do that? Well, you have to put a lot of work into it traditionally. So a few years ago, we were looking at ways of using AI to solve a lot of content problems, and most importantly, create authentic and meaningful relationships between brands and consumers. And so we said, well, the newsletter is a great vehicle for this, but what if we supercharged the newsletter with AI and did two things really well? First, let's eliminate most of the work. Let's use the AI to curate, to filter, to screen content, and then let's use the AI to then personalize the content for every reader. So the net result of it is it's a newsletter that literally is individualized for every reader. And Chris and Amith all got the Launchpad newsletter this morning, but all three of us got 3 different emails, right? That articles selected for each of us as individuals. And that's part of what makes it great. So that's what we've been building for the last few years. And we serve pretty much every kind of business that you can imagine. We think the situation right now really actually emphasizes the need for really high quality relationship oriented communication between companies and their audiences, whoever that may be, customers, obviously their employees. So the newsletter is just a simple way to do that.
Yeah, we found it. I think the timing on sort of getting it up and going was sort of this moment, like we're saying, like our last guest, Jimmy, this show, we're really trying to get resources in the hands of Launchpad members and the Launchpad Nation, the broader community. And so that's what I'm trying to, chock the newsletter full of. It is another tool, right? Not everybody, is watching this or remembers the links that are in the chat. Not everybody is following on Twitter, but it's a way to, put content that you think is important for your community or your audience in front of them. And the interesting thing, that I found is it's not much more work. You have to start doing the work, meaning you have to care and you have to find things that you think are compelling and interesting. But if you're sharing them with your team in Slack, if you're posting them to Twitter, then it's basically automated to connect that into Rasa.io and you take it from there, right?
I mean, last night we were on our way home and Schultz was like, my Rasa.io newsletter is going out tomorrow. And I was like, okay, I'll go to the grocery store. And by the time went across the street, picked up some stuff, came back and met him at the car, he'd actually done it. So, I mean, when you think about the pain that you would go through to create these newsletters from the marketing team, and they'd pulling teeth to get content, and then you're rewriting it and you're thinking about it, and ultimately it falls flat because we can't get out of our own way. It's actually pretty neat. And I love that connection between AI and authenticity. So can you talk a little bit about that and sort of some of your philosophy around that?
Sure. So, we define ourselves as a social purpose company. So very specifically, the philosophy that we believe in is best described by the Conscious Capitalism Organization. So we're a purpose-driven company. And our core purpose at Rasa.io is to better inform the world. So that's what we are here to do. That's why we exist. We believe that AI, and specifically our utilization of AI, can serve an important role in helping better inform people. And, if you look at what we're doing with content recommendation, in a sense, it's very similar to what you'll find in social media. with one big difference. So algorithmically, we use a lot of data that is captured by our newsletter tool as you engage with it to figure out what you're interested in, who you're similar to, all of that kind of stuff, which is what social media is doing. However, the big difference is social media is optimizing to maximize how much time you spend in app and on the website. That's what social media is doing. And it's motivated by a very simple lever, which is financial gain, right? It's about ad revenue. And that's understandable. That's the business model. Social media, you're not the customer, you are the product. So you got to remember that. Now, the flip side of that is what we do. We optimize to minimize time. So what we're trying to do is give you very high quality information and get you on your way. And that's one of the reasons we picked the newsletter format, is it doesn't have all of the trappings of potentially taking you down the rabbit hole of a website or an app or anything like that. It's a quick and really simple way of getting good information to people. So we utilize this concept of partnering with a brand. So Launchpad would be an example of the brand that curates great content, right? So you guys are saying, hey, we're trusted by thousands of people who want to receive content from us. So we're going to curate from great sources. We're going to have articles that we think are good. And then the AI personalizes from within there, but it optimizes again for the reader's value, right? As opposed to optimizations that exist in social. So that's a good comparison, is AI is being used for good, essentially, to help people get the right information at the right time and then get on their way.
Yep, makes sense. So if you were going to recommend getting started in this medium for our members and just, the general small business, what would be the kind of one or two tips you would have in terms of just getting going? Because oftentimes just getting started is actually the hard part.
Well, one of the most common challenges with content and newsletters or content in general is thinking beyond yourself. So one of the analogies I like to use is if you go to a cocktail party and you meet someone, whether you knew them or not, and all they did was they talk about themselves, well, it gets boring pretty fast, right? You don't want to hear just about me. I mean, you might want to hear a little bit about me if you're meeting me for the first time in particular, but you probably want to hear about other things that maybe we share in common. Yeah. So when you're curating content for a newsletter or for a website, the question is, what types of content should we include? And so let's say, for example, you're a community bank. Community banks, by the way, going back to the last segment on PPP, I think have been the unsung heroes in many ways, because most of the PPP loans that I've heard of anecdotally getting processed were by small community, small regional banks, which is amazing. But let's say you're a community bank and you want to put a newsletter out to small business owners, and you want to talk about right now things like PPP and so on. But you want to think about your traditional products and services. They're relevant to your newsletter, but they're like the center of it maybe. Then what are the circles around that, right? So in the case of a community bank, perhaps it has to do with financial planning, perhaps it has to do with retirement planning. If you have small business customers, things like lines of credit, but even more broadly speaking, things like how do you grow revenue? How do you optimize your employee relationships, right? These are topics that your customers are interested in. So really the tip I give people is flip the script. Don't talk about you. Think about what they want to hear, and then you'll be able to curate much more broadly. The other related component is where, people ask, well, where do you get this content from? You have to have an open mind about curating external content, not just relying upon your own content. And some brands naturally do that, but others actually are very, very worried about it for a variety of reasons. The number one reason is because they worry that their traffic from their newsletter will go away. The reality of it is actually our data proves decisively that you get more traffic through your newsletter if you do both original content and curated content. Yeah. But really the point of it is that you're serving the reader, and through that you get lots of long-term dividends.
Yeah, I mean that and the serving the reader notion it sort of nails the point, because we're all on a ton of newsletter lists, and you have a split second when you hit that inbox for somebody to say, oh, this is garbage, or this is spam, even if it's not truly spam, but it's sort of boring. Or in rare cases, but I think Rasa.io helps, and we're trying to do that thoughtfully. In rare cases, you get a newsletter and you open it up and you're like, okay, what's what's Launchpad telling me this week? I need this information. And that's obviously what you're trying to do as a platform, is enable customers to be that interesting thing that people look forward to.
And it's funny because with all of the distractions that exist today, right? The newsletter arriving in your, having something that is actually interesting in content is a very active engagement that happens. And by the way, we were talking about, we'll talk about this on a future thing. We were talking about the humble narcissist. I don't know which one of us is the humble narcissist. Me. But the humble narcissist is being like an interesting leadership persona. That came from a newsletter in my email inbox, right? And that actually ended up being content that was interesting. I engaged with it. I actually read it. I tweeted it out. I did something there. And now I have started to engage with that brand that surfaced that for me. So good content doesn't have to be written by you. Good content, you benefit, just like with SEO, we benefit from the community that we surround ourselves, and that curation is important.
All right, let's take a couple, maybe speed round some of these questions that in the audience Dorian has. Amith, I don't know, can you see those, or
I can, yeah, I can see that they popped up.
And then I'm going to come back, and I've got some broader sort of questions about this moment in time for you, but let's see if we can help Dorian with a couple of these questions.
Sure. So the first one I see is, what is the cost and the content? So on cost, as it describes right behind me, you can start sending for free. So our goal with this product is to enable all size businesses to be able to send a great newsletter easily. So the free plan includes up to 10,000 messages per month. So if you send a weekly newsletter with up to 2,000 contacts, you can do that at no cost. There are paid plans above that starting at $100 a month, but the free plan covers most small to medium-sized businesses that we encounter, which is fantastic from our point of view. Pricing goes up for larger lists. There is also a free offer on our website with no list size limitation, specifically around COVID-19. I can share that link in a little bit, but it's on our blog as well. But what we've essentially done is we've made our technology completely free with unlimited use in order to communicate on COVID-19. So if you're interested in sending a newsletter to your employees, to your customers, to whoever it is that you want to send, and it has to do with keeping them informed about health, wellness, safety, anything that relates to the COVID-19 crisis, it could be on any of those topics and mixes in your own content. There's no charge to that. We're going to continue to make that available at no cost throughout the time of this crisis, however long that lasts.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, we really wanted to try to help. I mean, again, given our purpose statement of better informing the world, we thought this would be a great time to step up and make that available. So we've had over 100 of those types of newsletters get going in the last couple of weeks. On the content question, I think we started to answer that, but essentially content comes from lots of sources. To the example of Launchpad, there's Twitter, there's Slack, there's integrations with what you're already reading. You can also pull in RSS feeds and say, hey, there's a content source. I want to pull in all of the New York Times. That would be a very large one, obviously, but you can pull in content, you can filter it, lots of tools around that. You can include video, you can include podcasts, you can include written articles. And then finally, on the distribution list, you either import that list or you can connect Rasa.io directly to the CRM of your choice. We have integrations built in with tools like HubSpot, Salesforce, and many others. So that should be fairly straightforward for most folks.
Amazing. That's great. Amith, did you want to ask me one last question?
Yeah, Amith, I've been sort of, obviously we're going through just sort of a crazy time right now. So, I'm curious, as an entrepreneur, as a New Orleanian, where do you think, this is headed? And, you've been an entrepreneur for many years and sort of gone through, cycles of business. And so, any sort of words of advice or encouragement for people as we go through this, and sort of come together as we're going through it?
Well, I think there's a lot of things to think about. And a good friend of mine, Andy Bailey, who's the founder and head of a company called Petra Coach, has been doing a lot of free webinars. I definitely would encourage you to go check out petracoach.com, Petra coach.com. They've got a ton of resources, but one of the things Andy's been talking about a lot for the last few weeks is this acronym DSRO. And so DSRO stands for defense, stabilize, reset, and offense. And so the idea behind that is that in defense, you're basically on your heels, right? You've just gotten punched in the jaw and you're trying to figure out which way is up. And then when you're looking to stabilize, you're trying to figure out, okay, let me get my footing and figure out what's around me, get that situational awareness back. Reset, it's time to try to essentially make a mind shift or a headspace change in terms of where you're at, looking ahead. And then offense is looking for opportunity, right? Now, obviously, you have to be successful in staying alive in order to consider offense opportunities. But one of the things to remember is that in times like this, when everybody's just trying to figure out which way is up, if you're able to maintain clarity of thought and look around you somewhat laterally, there can be opportunities, and this applies to any recession, right? I've been through a number of them now, but any recession, there are opportunities in downturns. But this is weird. This is like insanity speed-wise. The depth of this thing is crazy. It's just out of control nuts, right? So what that means is it's really, really stressful for all of us personally and professionally, but it also means there's going to be an unparalleled amount of opportunity out there. So my advice to entrepreneurs is make sure that you're strong at home. That starts with you. Focus on your emotional and mental health. Focus on your physical well-being to the greatest extent you can. Try to maintain some healthy habits, because if you don't start from that core and then extend it to your family and then extend it from there, your energy level is going to suck. You're not going to be productive at anything. And then when you kind of look beyond that and say, okay, well, what's next? Obviously, in your business, do everything you can for your team, your teams. And then looking ahead, it's okay, let's look at stabilization. Let's look at where we can find opportunities for some normalcy so we can just operate. And then obviously, if you're fortunate to be able to go through those phases, you can look ahead at offense and say, hey, offense not only gives us opportunity we wouldn't find possibly ever again in our lifetimes, but it also gives people hope, and it gives teams something to rally around. It's not the time to draw up a BHAG and say, hey, a decade from now, we're going to be doing this. It's more about, hey, 3 months from now, we could go kick ass if we took on this new idea, right? And it might be in a totally different business. So I think it's important to maintain that perspective and to go through these cycles. You might go through them every day, in some cases, or every hour. I've had that experience myself. It's tough. But I think it's important to gain that viewpoint. I can't emphasize enough how critical it is to maintain your own health and work on your families at all those levels. And Andy's got some great resources at petracoach.com, like I mentioned. I'd highly recommend you guys check them out.
That's amazing. And we'll include that in our wrap up of the show. So
yeah, thank you so much for being with us, Amith, today. We'll let you go. And hopefully we'll get a chance to see you again in person soon.
All right, sounds good. Yeah. Take care.
All right. Over the last 25 years, Dr. Allie Macintyre has worked for government, universities, and the private sector, most recently applying her behavioral economics PhD to her work as chief of staff for a software startup, helping the founder take the company from incorporation, acquisition, and expanding a team of 3 to 25, all dispersed across 7 countries with almost zero attrition. She's currently a remote research fellow in the Center for Behavioral Economics, Society, and Technology. Wow, this is a bio. And an expert in building processes, culture, and teams for fully remote companies. So as we all are going remote, we thought it would be great to hear from Allie, who is up somewhere in the mountains of my home country. So there's a lot of layers of mystery there for those of you who don't know what my home country is.
Fellow Canadian.
She may or may not be a fellow Canadian, but last we didn't say where she was. Thanks for staying on top of it. Allie, it's great to meet you in person. How are you doing?
So great to meet you. I'm doing well. How are you? Can you hear me?
She's not Canadian. Listen to that accent.
Oh. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, it's great. It's great to meet you in person, Allie, and thanks so much for coming on board. We obviously have gone from a world where remote working is something that we actually are remote in our company because we're distributed all across the country. And I've always said that maintaining our culture in a remote environment is one of the hardest challenges we as a company face. That concept is out the fucking window because I got a lot bigger challenges to deal with than my remote culture, just full stop. But It is a huge challenge. And what's interesting is we've gone from companies recreating the idea of being remote and doing that and being on the cutting edge of sort of a new way of working in the future of work to basically everybody now working in a remote environment. So I'm dying to hear your tips and tricks for our audience, for our members, and for folks who are finding themselves at a home and disjointed from their team.
Yeah, exactly. And I totally agree with you. It's just been really wild for me to see, well, first of all, best way to get rid of a problem is to get a bigger problem. So that's great that culture's not your problem anymore because, you know, you have bigger problems. Awesome. But yeah, it's been really wild to see that what was kind of a niche and a little bit weird way of working that I had to always explain to people how does it work that you have people across 5 continents and different time zones, and yet they still manage to get work done. And so now people are now it's gone from something very niche and a little bit alternative to just everybody being at home and figuring out how to work remotely. So yeah, and I guess, you know, I know there's a lot of there's a lot of confusion at the moment, and I can't fix most of it, but I know some things about remote work. So I love what you're doing with the Launchpad TV and bringing those resources to all of your members. And that's, you know, that's a really big part of remote work too, is just communicate. So yeah, so you're already doing it.
Yeah.
You say you have a question.
I do. Yeah. This has been a, you know, way to stay connected with our members, and probably, you know, there's a lot of other companies that are like discovering Zoom for the first time, or, you know, finding, you know, you have to pivot if you aren't able to actually see people in person or get on an airplane. I'm curious, you know, from your point of view, I described that we're not going to go back to normal. We're going to go back towards normal, right? So there will be a swing back as things open back up again. But what do you think will be the lasting impact of this time on organizations' willingness to accept or encourage remote work? Remote work is flourishing right now. We're all being forced into it. There's a lot of people that are learning it. What do you think is going to be the lasting impact?
So for the lasting impact, I'd say, well, something like this is a huge shock to the status quo. So it's like a huge shake-up, obviously. It's a big disruption. And that requires adaptation and experimentation. And so there's a lot of people playing with stuff that it would have taken, you know, years of a consultant doing a, you know, kind of feasibility study, and then like a lot of policies. And now people are having to be very kind of entrepreneurial and on the kind of learning on the fly of how do you use Zoom? Everybody mute their Zoom, you know, like lock the kids and the dogs out of the room. So, you know, all those sorts of things are very, you know, everyone's kind of grappling with that. And I think that people are going to find things that work and don't work very quickly. And it's, you know, I really hope that remote work is much more common and definitely here to stay in future, because just coming back to what you're talking about with opportunity zones, you know, one of the problems with kind of concentrating all of the investment and companies and things like that on coast or particular areas is that there's less like career opportunities for people unless they leave their home area. You know, I grew up in a regional area that was low socioeconomic kind of environment, and just the idea that if you lived in Indiana or something, you could have the same job as somebody who lives in San Francisco, like is just, I think is the cool part of remote work. So one of the cool parts.
Great. Well, what do you, so for a new team who's now found themselves remote, what are some do you have a couple tips or tricks that you would suggest to folks to help make that transition more smooth?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously I've been getting text messages from people who were 100% co-located before, and now suddenly they're working remotely, and they're just, you know, how did you do this? Like, how did you get anything done? What would you tell me to do? So my first 2 things, I guess, is, well, first of all, the first step is just to be really, just be kind and compassionate to yourself and everybody around you that this is intense, this is big, it's a really big time. and everybody's doing the best they can. So, and then my next tips, I guess, for an individual for dealing with remote work would be turn off your notifications if you can. Turn off notifications for everything so that you can focus, because being at home already, there's distractions about being at home. So if you turn off all your notifications, you might get some work done. And also be really strict about boundaries. Like when you finish work, I think is the most important boundary to have. Like have some sort of ritual or some sort of deadline of when you're going to finish your day. So.
Any tips on when is appropriate to break out the bag of chips, or how to stay away from the bottle of wine in the afternoon?
Why is he looking at you, Anne?
I said I drink less now because I don't have a lunch glass of wine.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, so our tagline with Prosperous was always the freedom to do your best work however you work best. So
I like that.
So that was something that I was really passionate about, enabling that for all of the people who worked with the company. And so if chips or wine is what you need to get your work done and you're still getting your work done, then you're a grown person and you can make your own choices.
So we met through a former colleague of mine, and that just reminds me, there were many years on the consulting realm where we'd be like hotel room jockeying our way through. And I can remember we had a colleague and she was like, you know what I'm going to go home and do? I'm going to go home and work on this spreadsheet over a bag of Pringles and a Heineken from the minibar. And like, that's where she would go and do her like in-depth detail. And so sometimes a bag of chips and a Heineken is a great way for you to activate that remote mindset.
Yeah. So I have a question for you about sort of synchronous versus
you have too many questions on this one.
Asynchronous work.
No, give me all the questions.
Because I think it's easy, similar to an organization that people feel like, oh, I'm stuck in meetings all day long and I didn't have time to get my work done. Right now is a time where we could all be stuck on Zoom calls all day and again, not get our work done. So how do you find balance between sort of, communication, I don't know, managing your inbox, being on Zoom calls, find time to actually, turn your notifications off and get some focus time done, especially, when you're at home.
Some of us
and
like to hit the emails out of the inbox as they come in, like they're in a batting cage, How do you avoid that?
That's practice, and that is maybe you need to have a different computer or or just don't open those browsers. Like have a browser that has your work email in it, and then have that browser completely shut and work on Chrome or Safari instead. So it's just like if it's not there, I can't pay attention to it. So I was really terrible at this, but I gradually got better and better at it. The asynchronous part of it, like communication is the most important thing, like communicating and then over communicating, but not having too many meetings. So that's kind of a balance. And again, another experiment for you to run. Like, I don't know if you're using Slack or if people are using Slack or that kind of communication, then you just have tools, you just have channels where people will post things like a stand-up, update, this is what I did today, this is what I'm going to do tomorrow. And it's just more passive, receiving the information or reading the information when you're ready, and close down Slack. Don't put it on your phone. Don't have notifications on your phone. All those things can help you get the focus. So
I like that. I like the idea of boundaries too, which is like kind of sometimes when you're in the office environment, I mean, actually that it's like the least boundary, right? Because there's the drive by. I love it because I like to drive by someone's desk when I have an idea and I'm like, hey, let's do it's really frustrating for people, I'm sure. But I think the idea of boundaries, when you're in a remote environment, all of a sudden you can start to define your boundaries personally. And so kind of like the personal recovery plan, it's about communicating, here's my, personal engagement plan, really. what you're saying, and these are the boundaries that I'm going to have. And one of the things we try to encourage our team, so we often get a lot of questions, right? And right now we have a lot of our members asking for relief. And so when people ask for relief, you know, that email comes in and it's like a shiny email and if someone needs help and you're like, well, we finally had to say to everybody, like, it's actually mentally draining if you respond to every single one of those requests as they come in. And we don't actually have enough information to decide how to handle the request. So we're kind of like terrible at responding. So how do we actually set the expectation? And what we did was we set a process where I was like, I don't want you to read it. I don't want you to take the emotion in. I want you to put it into a box. And on this particular date, we're going to review everything that's in that box, but we're not going to do it beforehand because we can't do anything until we get there. And it takes kind of that notion of like a boundary to actually start to protect doing the right thing and also setting the right expectation with people. Would that be a fair?
Absolutely. Yeah. Setting expectations. I mean, this is something that you can have in an email autoresponder saying, you know, I check my emails at 4 o'clock every day. So at Pacific time, 4 o'clock every day. So then people know that if they email you at 9 o'clock, they're not going to get a reply at 9:10. And it also gives you the brain space to know that you're under no obligation to check, or, you know, you're not under any obligation, but also you're not allowed to check. Because for me, I wanted to be responsive, and you end up, like you said, like you fight a lot of fires. And in a moment of crisis, when there's a lot of people asking a lot of questions and like your team is freaking out and that sort of thing, then maybe you have office hours where you are 100% available, like on Slack or via email or text message or whatever. So that then you can be in that firefighting mode of like solving problems and answering questions. And but being in that kind of mode across all the different things that you're trying to do in a day is just like, it's a really good recipe for burnout. So and it's also, then it's very hard to work on the things you thought you're going to work on that day, because then like a bunch of things, like you start off the day with a shiny plan, I'm going to achieve this and this and this, and then a whole bunch of other stuff comes in that, you know, via email, Slack notifications, whatever, and then, you know,
yeah, I mean, we do that. We sort of start the day, write down what our goals are for the day, the objectives, the things we want to achieve. And
we do that every day, like clockwork.
But it's very easy. It's very easy if you just get in your email to be, you know, batting the balls and, you know, pinging, you know, people are pinging on Slack, or, you know, my phone just rang during this. That idea of boundaries, because it's whose priorities are you working on? Are you focused on those priorities that you set for yourself at the beginning of the day? Or are you just focused on everybody else's priorities, right? Your email inbox is full of everybody else's priorities, but that's, you know, not what you set out your day to accomplish. And a lot of times it happens all the time. I do it all the time. You sit there and you're like, what did I actually accomplish today? I answered a bunch of emails. That feels like a waste of energy. It increases stress. You know, you go home feeling like you didn't accomplish anything that day. It's very easy for that to happen.
I have some days, though, more days than not, where I'm like, what did I accomplish today? And I'm like, I didn't even respond to one email. Yeah. I hate email. I'm not good at responding to email. The team knows that.
Well, I totally get that. And the one thing I'd say for that is that what would happen to me is that I would have, because I don't know if you've heard the maker schedule and manager schedule. Yeah, so when you are a maker and a manager, then you're trying to balance the I'm trying to, you know, manage a team or processes or whatever, but I'm also trying to output actual creative, you know, I'm actually trying to create things as well. And so trying to balance those two things. And what would happen I would be sucked into the firefighting and the problem solving, that sort of thing, which is stuff I wanted to do because it was supporting the team, and it was supporting the people that I worked with, and it was solving problems, and it was exactly what I wanted to do to help, you know, enable everybody to do their job better. It's just that at the end of the day, I would get into a guilt spiral because I'd look at my like expectations of what I was going to do that day, and then my reality, and then I'd, you know, try and work until like 2 o'clock in the morning to try and achieve something. And what I ended up doing was writing a list of my done this list instead of my to-do list. I would write a done this And so then I would be able to go through and be like, yeah, I solved that problem with that, and I did that, and you know, I ran, and what I call it is running errands on the internet. So and so instead of having like your errand list, you write down the things that you managed to get done, and then it just gives you that little like, oh, I'm allowed to.
A little more satisfaction.
Yeah.
That's good. A done list. I'd like to do that. I like it. Okay. Well, for our audience, we're going to post obviously this video, but I would love, I think sometime, Allie, maybe you'll come back and we'd love to get some Q&A and get some ideas and problems that our team's got that you can help out with. But we are at the end. Do you want to give a good shout out to the audience in terms of any tips and tricks for surviving COVID-19?
Well, when I figure it out myself, I'll let you know. No, I'm just kidding. It's crazy. Like, there's just no other way to say it. This is a big time. It's crazy. And as far as like surviving surviving the uncertainty, I would say the best way that I've found to approach things when things are really uncertain and there's no process and there's no precedent or anything like that is just to adopt that everything's an experiment. So I don't really know how to do this, so I'm just going to experiment, have a hypothesis. My hypothesis is that, you know, if I shut the door, I'll be able to work better. Like, just something simple. And maybe I do, maybe I don't. If I eat chips, maybe I'll focus. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. And so everything's an experiment. Does it work to have daily stand-ups? Does it work to have weekly stand-ups? And that way, nothing's a failure. It's all just information that you got from your experiment.
That's awesome.
So
one tip I have that we've been doing that I really like,
Yeah.
and I'll let the expert weigh in, but one of the things, we do a daily management stand-up with our team just to kind of troubleshoot, go through issues. We do it so that we avoid the, like, hey, I need this question answered or this fire. And so we sort of, unless like the house is burning down, like we can probably cover it in our daily stand-up.
And be together, right? A lot.
You just,
Oh.
you bit by bit. You bit by bit. Go ahead. I'll give it to you.
I mean, just, you know, see each other's, I think that, a lot of it's sort of just,
but one thing that I love about it is we end up having like random conversations, like water cooler conversations, right? Like when you're sitting in a room having a meeting in person, you get to jaw a little. Like, what did you do last night? What's going on? What are you thinking about? How annoying is your husband? And those kind of conversations can come into play during those team stand-ups. And so I would say from a remote perspective, it's very easy to want to be very efficient. And I think efficiency is important in respect of sort of meeting things. But I do think finding and carving out a little time for that in-person personality that I think we really miss and is one of the benefits of in real life experiences. And so that's my tip on remote work and daily stand-ups.
Absolutely. I mean, I would love to come back and talk to you about different ways that we did that and the things that worked and didn't work. But yeah, just remembering that people need people. And even if we're not in the same room, then like you said, being able to have that back and forth and complain about your husband and is really important.
Yeah. All right, Allie, thank you very much for joining us today. We'll let you go see you again.
And do you want to do our 1 minute wrap up?
I think you should do our 1 minute wrap up.
Okay, I will. So thank you all for joining us on Launchpad TV. This was Lifestyle Business. We were delighted to host Jimmy Flores as he told us about how he is doing the work of getting PPP available to the underserved entrepreneurs and companies that desperately need it in this time. We also heard from Amith Nagarajan, who told us how he's using AI to make authentic contact come to life through RAS.io. And I loved his story about how they're working to better inform the world and all that they're doing during COVID-19. And finally, Dr. Alison Macintyre joined us, and she shared with us and dropped some tips and tricks on how to engage in a newly remote world. I learned a lot from it.
I did too. It was
Pro
great.
tip, boundaries. Other pro tip, care about each other and have fun. So to all of you, I hope you're caring for each other, being nice to each other, and having a little bit of fun.
And if you want to catch any more of this show or watch it again, it will be up on our blog, lp.co/blog. We also will include contact information, whatever they want to put out there, Twitter handle, LinkedIn for all of the guests. So Dorian, you can follow up there after the show. And thanks so much for joining us today.
Dorian, great to see you, and thank you for all the amazing questions.
Yeah, and we will see you guys back for Wind Down Wednesday.
Ooh, yes, Wind Down Wednesday tomorrow.
At what time?
At 4:30 Pacific time.
4:30 Pacific, 1:30 Eastern.
We are going to be hosting none other than Goop featured wine guru for natural wine, Melissa Modanlu.
And if you get headaches from your wine, you don't want to miss this one, because she'll be here talking about the benefits and pleasures of natural wine.
That's right. She runs Rock Juice. You can order wine from her, and that wine will give you a hangover.
And then we'll be back on Thursday with Lifestyle Business here on Launchpad TV. Same time, same place, noon Pacific, 3 Eastern on Thursday. We'll see you then. Thanks, everyone.